Hello!
How are you?
Good, good, ça va?
Oui, oui, oui.
Enchanté, encore?
Oui, encore. Merci de te déplacer.
Oh my god, no problem.
Hi there, welcome to episode 13 of Queer Legends and Oral History Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Dern. In this episode, I head to Montreal's gay village to speak with one of Quebec's hottest drag sensations, Barbada de Barbades, or Barbada from Barbados for all of you English-speaking queens. Out of drag, it is Sylvain Potvin, a longtime children's educator and a music teacher whose alter ego happens to be one of Canada's sweetest and probably busiest drag queens. Barbada from Barbados has been performing drag for nearly 2 decades, and while you haven't seen her racing other drag queens, you can see her co-hosting Call Me Mother on OUTtv, which is back for season 2. Meantime, Barbada also has her own children's show for CBC Radio-Canada.
La musique est là pour toi, et Barbada aussi.
I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. It includes life lessons from a backpack, how the Air Cadets can prepare you for drag, plus some tea about Drag Race.
Well, I started drag 17 years ago. Actually, I should probably go further than that too. I've always been in a pretty, I wouldn't say marginalized, but I was always very different, starting from my very birth. My mother is white. She's from Quebec City, and I was born in Quebec City also. My father is obviously black, but I've never met him. So, in the 80s, because I'm not going to tell you my age, but I was born in the 80s. Anyways, so it was obviously already very different for a white woman to have a black child without a father, basically, So it was from my very young age, I was already, different from that. And I hadn't done anything yet,
What little Sylvain did do was breeze through grades 1 to 3, and it was a small private school that kept different hours, which better suited his mom's odd hours working as a nurse.
We were 8 kids in my 4th grade class with Madame Pinsonneau, which I remember perfectly. And, looking back, I kind of think that Madame Pinsonneau is probably the person who gave me that passion for teaching, I guess. She was pretty strict, but very, in French we say exigeante, So she had her standards. She knew where she wanted to go with us. But she was so loving and so fun to work with, and I definitely, wow, I don't think I've bursted through 4th grade really fast thanks to her, and also thanks to the fact that we were only 8 in our class. So, and then the next year when I was in 5th grade.
Just like drag, Sylvain excelled at grade school. The school's small and combined grade 4, 5, 6 class helped him jump into Quebec's high school system a year early at only 11 years old.
Like most people, I say high school, is a very hard path because, teenage years. And as soon as you're different, as soon as you know that you don't want to follow the same path of everyone, or as soon as there's something tiny different, you realize that you're different. You realize that, and you especially when you're a year younger, like I was, it was pretty intense, and it really helped me build, I wouldn't say a shield or a carapace, but I have a backpack with my experiences and mon bagage, that I travel with, and I put all that life experience in my backpack, and I think we all have that kind of backpack. And some people have a backpack that it looks, normal, but I guess for me, it was a backpack that was very different, and so it was easier for people to try to hit it and try to, I wouldn't say it was, I didn't come back from school crying every day, and I didn't blah, 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 but I knew I was different, and I know I ate alone so many times during lunch breaks, so it was very particular, but I never saw it really as, it was sometimes a bit difficult, I'm not gonna lie, but in the end, I kind of built filled my backpack with all these, I'm going to say rocks or that were kind of hard to, heavy things, exactly, that were hard to travel with. But in the end, that made me stronger. Instead of hurting me when people would hit my backpack, they would hurt themselves because they would hit the rocks and all those heavy things in the backpack. So when I look back at those years and when I realize where I am today, I realize that the reason why I'm not impacted by all those negative comments or all those is because my backpack is really full of stuff. And even though, my backpack has all these little rhinestones and this little paillettes and all those
little stickers and unicorns.
Exactly. They feel like, it's going to be easy to hit it. But when they hit it, they realize that there's a lot of rocks in it and they hurt themselves, basically. And I don't feel a thing.
Along with that very particular childhood, Sylvain's teenage years are surprising too. Would you guess that the future flamboyant and fabulous Barbada from Barbados developed her drive and fierceness in the Canadian Cadets program?
The cadet program is really a youth program. And some of the activities are, I wouldn't say similar, but people have a tendency to think that, you're doing military activities. No, of course not. We're doing, for example, I was doing music. That was like my main optional activity that I loved. But I was in the Air Cadets, so we'd have classes on all sorts of stuff like meteorology, like planes and all sorts of stuff like that. And I think that's also it gave me a lot of helpful tips to fill my backpack. I was very proud of, what I accomplished in that. So, when you have to deal with all sorts of stuff in the cadets, with either you're an instructor or you have, cadets to take care of, because the more you go, the more rank, you become, the higher rank you become, and the more responsibilities you have. And so it really, really builds your self-esteem, your confidence, your sense of responsibility. Leadership, definitely. We had classes on leadership also. And that's really where I discovered also my passion for music. So that's how I started music. That eventually turned into, like I said, college and music, and then music teaching in university.
How's that for a backstory? And how many drag queens do you know with formative years in the Canadian Cadets program? And not just that, 5 years as a Canadian Armed Forces employee teaching music. And all this gave Sylvain, and eventually Barbada, a really beautiful sense of confidence.
The thing people don't realize about me is I always say yes to everything that is offered to me. Like 98% of the time, if someone comes to me and offers me like a project, an opportunity and something like that, I always say yes. So people like kind of see me somewhere and they're like, you should do that. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And so that's how I started music. That's how I started cadets. That's how I started music. That's how I started also drag way later, way after that. 2003, someone offered me to do a show with them in drag, or out of drag actually. She was a drag, Lolita, and she was like, you should come and try to do shows. I saw you dancing. I want you in my show, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, sure, why not? Let's try it. And again, see what I'm saying? Someone offered it to me. And
so this is backup dancing for Lolita.
Yeah, exactly. I was dancing for Lolita as, out of drag. I wasn't in drag. And I've done it for a few drags during 2.5 years. And then in 2005, again, someone said, you know what? You're really good on stage. You should try doing like a contest. And a few friends had tried drag. And I'm like, sure, why not? I had a friend who did my makeup. It was pretty awful. And I did 2 numbers for that show, for that contest, which was called Star Search at Cabaret Mado, and that's where Barbada really was born. So that was in 2005. And in my head, it was really just a one-shot deal.
So how do I pronounce it properly? Is it Barbada or is it Barbada?
In French, Barbada, Barbada in English. Okay. Just because Barbados, Barbada.
Gotcha.
Although some people kind of want to say Barbada, but I feel like it's like Barbadass. Barbadass. It could work also. So yeah, Barbada.
That sounds like a hashtag waiting to happen.
You're right, it does. I love that. You know what? Come at me, bitch, because I'm a Barbadass. Yes. Oh, that's funny. So
So
eventually
you
in
started off, it
2005.
wasn't pretty necessarily.
Oh my God, of course not. It wasn't. It was terrible. I have pictures of that. I'm like, oh, I can't believe that.
Is that where the name originated? Like from this
Okay.
early moment,
My
beta drag.
my father was from Barbados, right? So I'm like, you know what? Let's just do a little clin d'oeil, a little wink at that. And again, in my head, I was doing like a one-shot deal. That was it. So I really didn't care of finding a name that was very, I don't know, significant or, you know, impactful. I wasn't thinking marketing or PR or whatever, not at all, you know. And then a few months after that show on February 2005, another drag approached me and she's like, oh, you know what? I saw what you did at a contest. I kind of like, would you want to do it again? I'm like, sure, why not? Let's do another show. And I always like doing shows, definitely. I always loved being on stage, even when I was really, really, really young. My uncle and aunt, they lived in Rimouski and had this really nice staircase in their living room that went to the second floor. So I'm like, that was like, for me, that was perfect stage. You had the stage up there and then the staircase coming down. Little did I know that
Oh, girl. Even as a kid,
even as a kid, exactly. So you understand that it wasn't a surprise when I came out to my mother.
From a family staircase in Rimouski to performing at sold-out drag performances, comedy festivals, and on a growing number of TV shows and online ads, Barbada is well on her way to becoming a household name in Quebec and in the rest of Canada. And she's also got a really good reputation for positive vibes and always wanting to help others to live their drag dreams.
I definitely was the person who, or still am, the person who kind of wants to give the drags better conditions de travail, you know, better conditions. Exactly, yeah. Better working conditions. Like, I don't care if people don't like it, but I don't mind saying people like my salary, how much I make and how much each contract pays, because I think it's the only way for newer drags to realize that, oh, wait, I'm getting paid $100 for a night to do 4 songs. And they're like, wow, $100. I'm like, no, girl, that's because when I started 17 years ago, I got $100 for a 4-song performance. And today, 17 years later, you are still getting $100 per night for a 4-song performance.
Is there maybe a drag union in the future?
I don't think so, because I don't think there's enough drag. You know, if you want to make it a career, if you're thinking of making it a career, join the l'Union des Artistes. Go. There's things for you there. There are people who will help you there in order to not get
Taken advantage of.
Exactly. Because that's exactly what happens all the time.
People don't realize how much work it is.
Especially nowadays with the expectations of the public, because they see Drag Race, they see a lot of shows, and they're expecting that level of expertise in drag, you know, and in shows, and they see all these perfectly these amazing outfits.
The RuPaulification of drag.
Yeah, RuPaulification of drag, definitely.
But Montreal has and Quebec, en général, grosso modo, like, we have our own style of drag, and maybe you could speak to that, because when you look at Canada's Drag Race, maybe I often, like, my husband and I are sort of screaming at the television sometimes when the Quebec queens don't win, because it's like, hello, rest of Canada, why are you not getting the joke?
Yeah, definitely. I think, but this isn't just about drag, but it's definitely, I realize how we have, in French we say les deux solitudes in Canada. You know, there's...
Yep, the two solitudes for sure.
There's Quebec and there's the rest. And I've realized it's so much on, for example, on doing Call Me Mother, on how, like, I talk about Call Me Mother here in Quebec, and people are like, what is that? I don't know. And they're like, a lot of people are like, and, you know...
I was going to get to that show shortly, because that's you're going into season 2. Congratulations.
Thank you.
By the way.
Thank you. Yeah. I realized last fall, how there's really a different, you know, perspective on the rest of Canada and Quebec. People from Quebec don't really know what's happening outside Canada, outside Quebec.
Yeah.
And a lot of people from outside Quebec don't know what's happening here. And so I did this, I'm going to say, pretty big show. It was an OUTtv, which is a channel that, like, here in Quebec, no one has ever heard of or close to.
It's English, right? So it's more like English and French, right?
I guess, but then again, outside of Quebec English still, French, sorry, outside of Quebec French, still know what is going on in English. As for here, like if you're French, like you watch French shows. You'll watch Netflix, like you'll watch American shows more than the rest of Canadian shows. You know what I mean?
But Call Me Mother is like, it is groundbreaking. It's groundbreaking television. It's not just drag queens, it's inclusion. And that is kind of what you are. Like,
Absolutely.
I think to myself, you're like la reine d'inclusion, the queen of inclusion.
Well, I wouldn't say la reine d'inclusion. I try to be as much inclusive as I can. If I do shows, I'll try to have like a diversity in the people I book for different shows and stuff like that. But it's not always possible, obviously. But I try to have that
like
conscience.
General, like you come from a diverse background. You've
Yeah,
lived, that's your lived experience, right?
True. Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely.
And now you're a mother on TV. Are you a mother in real life? Do you have like local kids?
Yeah, I do. I do have 2 kids, and one. How do you say? Les fausses couches. I don't know the word, but anyways, a miscarriage.
Oh, no.
Well, I kind of did because like she said yes, and then she bailed out, and then she never did any shows anymore. So I'm like, what? So yeah, I did have a miscarriage, but I do have 2 very successful drag daughters. I don't have a drag son yet, but maybe, you never know. But I definitely agree that inclusion is part of what I try to push as much as I can. And yeah, I mean, this show, that's the reason actually why I said yes to this show. Because, Call Me Mother. Because it was offered to me at the end of 2020, so, middle of the pandemic. And then a lot of people had these great ideas of show and were always, contacting artists for like, oh, I have this show, I have this idea. And so many meetings that led nowhere.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, oh, that's probably just another of those meetings. So I talked with the person who's like, well, okay, this is a drag contest. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, as soon as she said drag contest, I'm like, oh, this is not going to be for me. Obviously, I'm not a fan of Drag Race. I think I've watched like 3 or 4 episodes in my whole life of the RuPaul's Drag Race franchise. Or I've watched a few episodes of Canada's Drag Race, but not like the American. Of course. So I kind of had to. I kind of wanted to see, how it went and how they made it. And it's fun to see people on that show. But so I'm not a fan of Drag Race. I'm not a fan of drag competitions in general.
So when you started out in drag, were you doing competitions or were you just doing shows?
I did a first competition in 2005, which I lost to a Australian drag. The first round I lost, and that's why I was like, I don't mind losing. It's just a one-time thing, right? But then eventually I kept on going. People offered me gigs, and I got a bit more experience, and I did the contest again at less than a year later, and I won that. So I went like up into the finals, and I won to the finals, and blah blah blah. But other than that, the only other contest I did, and obviously it wasn't on TV, and again, it was just like in bars and clubs and stuff like that, was Fierté, or Mixed Montreal Pride. Mixed Canada Pride, because that was in 2017. We had Canada Pride here in Montreal, and Rita Baga organized a big contest who was like all over Canada with people from, like there was finals from, like other cities in Canada in the big final. And I won. So I'm really, really happy about that. It was the only big contest. Well, the second big contest in my drag career that I actually won. So I'm really happy and proud about that. But I'm not a reality fan, reality TV show.
So we won't be
fan,
seeing you auditioning for RuPaul's Drag Race anytime.
Oh, I did, but they're never gonna take me. I mean, okay. Oh, okay. Let's go into this.
Some dish. Are you gonna give us some dish?
Let's go into this.
I don't want to spend I want to talk about you. I don't want to dish.
No, but I think it's important. I think it's important that we do talk about this. A lot of people think if you've never been behind the scene of a reality show, a lot of people think it's a reality show, but it's not. It's not reality. It's fake. And a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I know it's fake. I know. No, you don't know. If you've never been behind the scenes, like reality show, especially like it's a Canadian show, so it has to go from one end to the other of Canada. they have a marketing list. Let's say we have 12 drag queens. We need at least our top 4 in our head, main drags that are going to make it to the end. Then we need our middle, and then we need the newer drags that you're like, nah, they're probably going to get eliminated first. Unless there's a big surprise, but they're probably going to let, so you can't have all those amazing...
Queen, a large queen.
Yeah, but also you need a queen from Toronto, you need queens from Montreal, you need... So when they build their show, they're like, okay, we have let's say our top 4, top 5, and in their heads, in their top 4 or 5, they at least need someone from British Columbia, from Ontario, and from Quebec. And so far, what we've seen is exactly that. In our top 4, you always end up with people from each one of those provinces, right? And I know that that's pretty much what's going to happen again for season 3, right? Because you want to make sure that your audience stays to the show. As soon as there's no one from Quebec, the people are like, okay, we're not watching the show anymore. As soon as there's no one from Ontario, which would never happen probably, but you're going to lose all the Ontario, or a lot of the Ontario audience.
Let me just jump in here and say that this interview was recorded before Canada's Drag Race Season 3 started streaming. And spoiler, she wasn't very far off. Okay, back to the interview. This is where I was asking, what's the difference between RuPaul's or Canada's Drag Race and Montreal's own awesome style of drag?
Drag performers, in Montreal, they really build their numbers and their performances and their looks in order to give the show, right? But also, the main difference is that, like for example in Toronto, a lot of the venues have either, like in shows, they'll have 1 drag in the show, sometimes 2. They won't have 5 or 6 like you have on a weekend here at Cabaret Mado, right? Or sometimes more. They'll have 2 drags, and sometimes they'll do like 3, 4, 5 songs in a row in the same outfit. We never do that in Montreal. We never do that. Like if you have a show, you have a number, you have your look, and then you get changed. We never do that in Montreal. And so that already makes a big difference in the way you look, the way you dress, but also in the way you build your performance. Because you can have like an amazing, wonderful dress with big pads and the huge hair. But you know that if you have only 10 minutes to get changed, you can't bring that, and you have 4 performances to do in the show with 4 different outfits, 4 different looks, 4 different wigs. You can't bring 4 huge wigs.
You can't make everything complicated.
Exactly. It has to be a bit more simple, and it has to be less, wow. If I am to wear 1 outfit for the whole show, then obviously I'm going to bring something huge. I'm going to bring something that I'll need help to get into. And then I'm like, I can't move, but I don't have to come out of it before the end of a show. You know what I mean? I'll have a big wig that I can put on, glue, and that's it. But if you have to get changed every 20 minutes and 4 times in the night, you're obviously not going to do that. Do you know what I mean? And the dressing room, well, that would be also true at some other places too, but the dressing room at Cabaret Mado is like in basement, so you have to bring all your stuff downstairs. The dressing room at Cocktails is 2 floors up, so you have to go 2 floors every single performance you do. So bringing all that stuff, bringing all those, eventually you're like, you know what, let's just go a bit more simple.
Less is more, girl.
In the end. So that, I think, is the main difference.
How long have you been doing your drag story time?
We started it the first time during Pride 2016 in Parc Émilie Gamelin. So it was the last year that Pride was in Parc Émilie Gamelin, and I had a friend who is bibliothécaire for McGill, and he saw like a video online on the social media of a drag queen doing story hours in the US, and he's like, we should try to do it, blah, blah. I contacted people at Montreal Pride, and I told them we kind of want to do that, and they had a family day. You know, they would invite all the summer camps, and it was like a family day. And so we had a little kiosk there during that day, and we did a few story hours. So a year later, in 2017, that's when I did the first time like an actual library, like a drag story hours in the actual library. So that was in fall of 2017. And I ended up there was a lot of people. It was like there was a lot of people there at that activity. It was one of their bigger events of the year, and that's also when I didn't know, but that's also when Marc-André Grondin saw me for the first time. Marc-André Grondin, which is a comedian and actor, and he saw me. He came with his daughter, and I didn't know he was there because there's a lot of people there, you know. And I focus on the kids mostly because that's my main audience, and the parents are like in the back and are like, they have fun, but I'm like, parents, not today. You'll have your time. Come to Quebec, come to Meadow, come to Cocktail, but today, it's the kids. So I didn't realize that he was there, but also that's when he saw me for the first time and eventually contacted me, and 4.5 years later turned into that TV show, kids TV show that now is online now. But yeah, story hours, and then it just basically went from like one to the other. Again, like I was saying earlier, someone offered it to me and I said yes. And I'm like, okay. Someone saw that, oh, I'm a teacher. It would be fun. It would be good. It has evolved, obviously, since then. I mean, I've, perfectioned the whole, je l'ai perfectionné, and I upgraded the whole thing with, costume changes, and I bring little toys or little, so since then it has, and I've gone where people want me to go. If they ask me to go, then I'll say yes, but I don't push in order to go to libraries. Like I want people to want me there.
And people do want her there. In fact, Barbada is booked almost every weekend for Drag Story Hour at various municipal libraries all over the province of Quebec. Besides Season 2 of Call Me Mother and being the French language drag spokesmodel for online Visa debit commercials, Barbada has another upcoming show for OUTtv, and it seems like the sky is the limit for Barbada from Barbados. Thank you for listening. This Secret Agents production was researched, written, recorded, and produced by me, Sean Dern, and the executive producer is Ian Capstick. Queer Legends, an oral history podcast, is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Player FM, and wherever you go for great storytelling.